Okay, yesterday in Muktzeh we were talking about what's called Keli Shemalachta Leheter. A vessel's primary use is for permissible things, so that's not Muktzeh, basically. You can move it, you need the place, you want to bring it in and out, it's not Muktzeh, except you should move it for a specific reason. So basically like this, any toy or game that you're allowed to play on Shabbos is not Muktzeh, because it's Keli Shemalachta Leheter, you're allowed to play with it on Shabbos. Games you're not allowed to play on Shabbos, so then it's called Keli Shemalachta Leheter, because its primary use is for something forbidden on Shabbos. If you're not allowed to play that game on Shabbos, so then that object becomes Muktzeh. What are cases for that? So any game that normally you write by the game. In other words, let's say a game that you keep score, like Scrabble or any game like that you keep score. So you're not allowed to play that game on Shabbos because we're afraid you're going to keep score, even though I say I'm not going to keep score. But normally people keep score on Shabbos. So therefore you're not allowed to play that game on Shabbos because you might come to write. It's interesting, we mentioned this in old halacha, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. It says you're not allowed to play chess on Shabbos. Why not? Because in those days, people used to write down the moves. Every time they played chess, people would write down the moves. So again, chess was a game where you wrote down the moves. You wrote. Later halacha, going back a few hundred years already, where they write that today people don't write the moves, only the professionals maybe do, but normally people don't play chess writing down the moves. So halachically you can play chess on Shabbos. Checkers, not saying it's the thing to do on Shabbos, it's not exactly very Shabbos-dik, but again, halachically you're allowed to do it. Now for instance, I give you an example, a bicycle. I know there's all controversy with Rabbi Vaad. He said yes and no and yes, I don't know. But Lepel, in Ashkenazic halacha at least, you're not allowed to ride a bicycle on Shabbos, even where there's an Eider, or for that matter, Yom Tov, you're allowed to carry. Ashkenazic poskim write, you're not allowed to ride a bike on Shabbos. It's a bicycle. Why? And they bring down two reasons. Number one, the chain might break and you might fix it. It might fall off and then you'll fix it. Or the tires will deflate and you'll have to fill it up with air, which is again fixing on Shabbos, which is forbidden. So therefore, a bicycle, for instance, is Muktzeh on Shabbos. It's a Keli Shemalachta Leheter, which means as follows. If I need the place where the bike is, I'd be allowed to move it. Let's say somebody left the bike in the middle of the living room, whatever, and I need the place in the, so I can move the bike. If I want to use the bike for something permissible, which I can't figure out what that would be, then you'd also be allowed to. But let's say, to give you an example, somebody left the bike outside, and they're afraid it's going to get stolen. Then you're not allowed to bring it in. And there's no way you could create a usage for a bike that would be permissible on Shabbos.
If you have to hang some clothes on it.
Yeah, okay.
Keep open the door?
Huh?
Hold open the door?
A bike is not made to keep open the door. It would be very questionable if you could use a bike for that. It's not made to, whenever you see a bike open the door, the bike will fall down anyway. But tricycle, for instance, 3 wheels, that there's no air and there's no chain, so those you're allowed to ride on Shabbos. Little kids, huh?
Tires not air.
No, they don't. Not a tricycle.
Like a baby tricycle.
Baby tricycle.
Not the big ones.
No, the kids' tricycle. There's no air in the tire. They're not there. No, you don't fill up the air. Bicycle.
Those are like scooters. Those also don't.
So then that wouldn't be Muktzeh. But two-wheelers, the bikes would be Keli Shemalachta Leheter.
Scooter.
Skateboard is again, halachically you can skateboard on Shabbos. The question is if you don't go by an Eider or in a place where there's no Eider.
In your backyard.
So saying in your backyard, it's not Shabbos-dik, but halachically a skateboard would be allowed to use a skateboard on Shabbos. So therefore it's not Muktzeh. It's Keli Shemalachta Leheter. You would be allowed to. There's certain, on earth that's soft, maybe you're going to make plowing, whatever, but generally think it's not a problem. Now, building blocks. Okay? Legos and things like that. So it's a very interesting machlekes in contemporary halacha. Bottom line is, it's questionable if you could play Legos on Shabbos. Why? Because pieces that interlock, so that's firm, it's holding firmly. That might be a shaila bainim Vaad Rabbonim at least. So, or tinker toys or things like that. But, you know, the little blocks that kids have, they just pile one on top of another and they don't interlink, that's for sure is not muktzeh. Magnets, God, most people say magnets are not muktzeh. I saw one guy says it's muktzeh, I don't understand why. Why should it be muktzeh? Magnets are not muktzeh.
You can't feel something.
Huh?
You can't feel something.
Yeah, because it's not really interlocking. It's just, this falls off right away.
They also have some of the cheaper brands, not like the off-brands, they don't really stay together.
Okay, so again, even Legos is a machlekes in contemporary poskim if you could play with Legos today. There are people that are machmir say you're not allowed to. Other people say you could because it's not really firm. So if it's less than Legos, then, you know, it's more reason to say that you'd be allowed to play with it. But the point over here is, if you're allowed to play with it, it's not muktzeh. If you're not allowed to play with it, then it hasn't been a muktzeh. But like,
You mentioned Scrabble?
yeah, Scrabble you can't play on Shabbos for two reasons. Number one, it's a game that you normally keep score. But there's a second thing that I didn't come to yet, and I'm coming into it now. There's two types of Scrabble games, sets. There's the regular Scrabble, which is a plain board, no grooves, plain old-fashioned Scrabble, for those that grew up many years ago. Plain board, and then you just stick the letters on the squares. So they don't hold. So that's not called writing on Shabbos. Because you're not doing it. It's like taking letters and putting them next to each other. That doesn't do anything. The deluxe Scrabble, where there are grooves, and then when you put the pieces in the groove, it holds well that you can even flip around. That's the purpose. They can swing around the board. So that's another problem with playing Scrabble on Shabbos, because of writing. But then it would be maybe even closer to, it's not biblical because it's not permanent, but it's still rabbinically. But again, any game that you keep scores, like Scrabble, you wouldn't be allowed to play.
Is it matter of the kids' age or no?
If the kids are young, it's not so bad. The kids are under 6 for sure. Some people say under bar and bas mitzvah they could.
Well, they are grown-up kids.
Huh?
Grown-up kids.
You mean they act like a 5-year-old? In this you go by passport years, not mental years or behavioral years. Okay, now it's a ball muktzeh on Shabbos. So now the Shulchan brings down two opinions if a ball is muktzeh on Shabbos. If a ball is muktzeh on Shabbos, then it's muktzeh. If you're not, I'm saying, yeah, if you're not, and if you're not muktzeh, then obviously you can touch it. So the Alter Rebbe writes in Shulchan Aruch and Hilchos Muktzeh, the Alter Rebbe talks about a ball, and he brings on both opinions. He says the minhag is to be mekel, that you could play ball on Shabbos. But again, you have to keep in mind, if there's no Eidah, you can't play ball in the street. You can't play, if the ball goes over to your neighbor's yard, you're not allowed to bring it back in, unless there's an Eidah, because you can't carry from yard to yard without an Eidah Chatzeres. But there's an interesting Yerushalmi that the Kseis Shulchan brings down, that says there was a whole big neighborhood in Yerushalayim at the time of the Churban Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. The neighborhood was destroyed, and the Yerushalmi says because they played ball on Shabbos. So even though halachically you could play ball on Shabbos, but the bus can bring down. I mean, it's not for little kids. It's not the little kids not an issue, but for adults, it's not something that people should really do on Shabbos. Then you have another issue: soccer. Let's say you want to play soccer on Shabbos, it will be a difference if it's on grass or it's on cement. Now, halacha, I'm talking now halacha, not in the spirit of Shabbos. Halachically, soccer and cement in your backyard is not a problem because that's it. If you're only allowed to play ball on Shabbos. But on grass, you're not allowed to because when you're kicking, inevitably you're going to rip out grass. So even though your intention is not to rip out the grass, but it's called psikresha, for sure going to happen, so therefore you wouldn't be allowed to play soccer on mud or dirt or grass on Shabbos.
Is there any problem for men to walk on grass?
No, there's no problem walking on grass on Shabbos. Not only that, if somebody, let's say, has a wheelchair and you have to go over grass, so even though you're going to be making indentation in the ground, you know, halacha says you're allowed to do it because you're not making holes in the ground, you're just pressing it down. Plowing is when you make a hole in the ground. So all the poskim write that a wheelchair on mud or grass is not a problem because, again, you're not making holes, you're not plowing, you're just smashing it down, which is not a melacha and
Kick the
Shabbat.
ball even once, wouldn't
Huh?
be allowed to kick the ball even once, just to, like, let's say it came to you in the middle of a grass field. Kick it one time is still...
Again, if you do it one time, you make sure you're not going to be kicking grass, yeah, but one time becomes 2 times, 5 times, 10 times.
And also the Alter Rebbe knew that you were Yerushalmi. I mean, like, is there a reason to be...
He's talking halacha.
I know that, but I'm saying the Alter Rebbe said you can still be Mekel.
Halachically, you can be Mekel. The Alter Rebbe is talking a lot of things. The Alter Rebbe is not talking about the spirit of Shabbos. He's talking halacha. Is it a melacha on Shabbos? It's not a melacha on Shabbos.
I think most people don't
Basically,
play, like, they make it a thing not to play the ball.
Ideally, it's not the tennis. Moshe, a guy has a tennis court in his backyard, yeah? Halachically, you can play tennis. So therefore, a tennis racket is not muktzeh. The ball is not muktzeh. Ping pong, table tennis, yeah? Halachically, you can play table tennis on Shabbos, so it's not muktzeh. Is that the way people should spend their day? No, I mean, you know, Shabbos is a holier day, but you can't, if kids or teenagers want to play table tennis, you can't, it's not forbidden. What?
Forgive me for asking an unrelated question. I have this for a long time. I have this dilemma. At the end of our long walk, every day in Beverly Hills, there is this beautiful front yard. There are several fruit trees. Now my friend, he picks them up, and I don't feel comfortable even though I sent the owner a chocolate and asked permission, but I never get an answer. But he takes it, he picks it up, and it comes out from the private yard to the side yard. He gives it to me, and oftentimes I can't resist. I eat it. So I wanted to know if he picks it and he hands it to me, is it okay or not okay? Probably not.
Let me rephrase the question. A guy robs a bank and gives you the money. That's exactly the case. The guy is stealing. It's stealing. You can't take fruit off somebody else's tree. And he send him chocolate and you say, I'm sure you're letting me do it. That doesn't mean you're allowed to. No, I'm just saying.
Next time, rob the bank and send them chocolate.
Yeah, thank you. Right. Rob a bank and send the bank a box of chocolate to the teller.
Besides the fact that you can't pick fruit.
No, he's not talking to Shabbos. He's talking during the week. No, not Shabbos. Shabbos for sure you're not allowed to. Even if it's yours, you're not allowed to.
So, you said about young kids that they can do
Yeah.
something like if you kick the ball to your neighbors, that young kid can go and get the ball.
Not unless there's an Eruv. If there's an Eruv in the city and you go by the Eruv, then you could. Otherwise, you can't.
So I have to go knock on her door and ask permission.
That would be one way of not stealing, yeah.
Or not to take it.
By the way, there's a din in Torah that's called a chamsen. Chomas. Chomas means I steal, but I pay for it. In other words, you have something I like, I take it, but I'm not a pig. I'm not going to steal it for free. I'm going to put down money for it. That's also biblically forbidden as part of stealing.
So you can't give him a box of chocolate and take his food.
Right. Even if you give the box of chocolate first, not afterwards. No, it's mamish stealing. I mean,
Should he throw up everything he's eating?
yeah, no, I should do surgery, cut everything out.
I thought it was saying, Hagonev miganab patur.
Gainif
Yeah, but
It's
that's
okay,
something
Rishim
else.
Rishus.
min aganef potter. It's another misconception. Haganef min aganef, if you steal from one who steals, what the Gemara says, potter, from paying double. A ganef pays double, yes? If a ganef stole something, and I stole it from him, I don't pay the ganef double. But it's still biblical stealing. It's still biblical stealing.
So Robin Hood is a thief.
Robin is a thief.
אז לא עושה שאלה, ואיבן שימור רישוס.
Huh?
ואיבן שימור רישוס.
No, the shaila is Ukrainian, but you still have to pay back. Veshav is exiled, stole a blood.
His name is not Robin Hood. He's
Robber.
In Hood.
Robin Hood. Yeah.
That's his name.
Okay.
He was the Ganav in the Hood.
Now, toys that make sounds like music, like chimes and bells and rattles. I'm not talking about a baby. A baby could play with a rattle. But an adult cannot play with a rattle on Shabbos. You know, a baby rattle, they do a rattle to quiet the kid down. An adult, because you're making mashmiya kol, you're making sounds. And that you wouldn't be allowed to do on Shabbos. So again, if you're not allowed to do it, it's Muktzeh. If you're allowed to do it, it's not Muktzeh.
You just put it in the baby's crib and let him do it.
Yeah, the baby can do it. Huh?
As soon as you move, it'll make noise, right?
No, not always. We won't make a noise of a sound. Not if you go like this.
How about door knockers?
Door knockers also you shouldn't do on Shabbos. But we'll learn like that's not a din of Muktzeh. That's a din of making sounds on Shabbos.
It's
What?
it's not an instrument. It's just.
You don't need an instrument. If you drum on the table to a rhythm, it could also be a shaila of drum, of a musical instrument.
Or if you knock on the door with a knocker without a beat, without a.
So some poskim are mekel, some poskim are machmer. How people try to avoid it on Shabbos, it says. Huh?
It's just everything's a beat. It's minutes and time.
Yeah. Okay, anyway. Okay. Machat shinus u'meis u'mei mechaviv b'mayim kim shel agal teira. V'nan mekashem